All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Wednesday, February 25th. Appreciate everybody out there making us part of your day. Lots of stuff that we got to get to here on a Wednesday. Zach Taylor, Duke Tobin, they took the podium at the NFL Combine yesterday, and a lot of political stuff, a lot of diplomatic stuff, but I do think there are a few key takeaways, especially when it comes to Duke Tobin and some of the things he had to say at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. We're going to break down some of those comments, talk a little bit about what Zach had to say there as well. I think the biggest thing revolving around Zach Taylor is some of the news transpiring across the rest of the National Football League as it relates to play calling. Sean Payton, right? What is his number one strength? Well, we all thought it was offense. We all thought it was him calling the plays. He is giving up play calling. Davis Webb is going to be the play caller for the Denver Broncos next year. Mind you, that's a team that just went to the conference championship game. Carolina, Dave Canales, he's going to be passing those play calling duties along to an assistant as well, to the offense coordinator there with the Carolina Panthers. And Zach remains adamant that he is going to be still the one calling the plays. And he's kind of talked about this a lot. There's a lot of conversation and dialogue about, who the play caller is, and his take has always been it's a very collaborative effort, right? And he even joked with some members of the media that they could do a reality series about play calling in the NFL and have a camera following around the guys in the booth and the head coach and the quarterback, just so everybody could understand that it really is a collaborative process. But he continues to say that, and it seemingly is going to continue as far as him being the quote-unquote play caller for the Cincinnati Bengals. But we'll talk Bengals football. We'll talk Zach Taylor. We'll talk Duke Tobin, some of the takeaways from those press conferences. Also, we got to talk a little college basketball. UC had a golden opportunity on the road last night to pick up another huge win in the Big 12. Unable to do it. First fun 10 minutes or so of that ball game looked like they kind of picked up right where they left off. Baba Miller playing well early. Mustafa Cham had another incredible night for the Cincinnati Bearcats, but not enough shot making. And there was only one way that Texas Tech could win this game, really ended up dominating this game, covered the 6.5-point spread, is they spread out the floor and they shot the rock. And that's exactly what Texas Tech did. Disappointing loss for UC on the road. We'll talk about that. The Miami Redhawks, they take care of business against Eastern Michigan up on the road in the MAC. They stay undefeated, win that game by 10 points. I think the game closed. I think the spread closed at like 8.5. When we were talking about it yesterday, it was 10.5. So if you took it then, a little bit of heartbreak there. But Redhawks stay undefeated, will continue to be favorites the rest of the way. It kind of feels like their next big test. Don't want to get too far ahead of things, right? Still have some games here in the regular season. Still going to get the best shot from these opponents. Still have a rivalry game, obviously, with OU there as well. But kind of feels like the stars are aligning for a crash course with Akron in the MAC tournament once again, and we'll see if Miami can knock them off. But still lots of work ahead in the regular season there as well. We'll have some other NFL Combine thoughts, lots of stuff circulating around the league. The Miami Dolphins, their brass. A lot of people are going to be paying attention to what the Dolphins do this offseason. Why? Because they have a quarterback that's making $50+ million. That probably isn't going to be the starting quarterback for them next year. Similar situation with the Arizona Cardinals there as well. Also, Omar Khan, general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which in my opinion is one of the most dysfunctional front offices in the National Football League. Maybe not dysfunctional is the right word, but just out of date, out of touch. And you look at the Steelers roster, and they're kind of a mess, right? If you're the Cincinnati Bengals, yeah, you're frustrated that you haven't lived up to expectations over the course of the past few years. But you look at Pittsburgh, and it's like, where are you going? You just got a bunch of old guys on your roster, really nobody to build around. You're expensive, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, but you don't play top-of-the-line defense as it relates to the rest of the National Football League. So he shared some thoughts on Aaron Rodgers as well as Bill Howard, second-year quarterback for Ohio State. Maybe he's the starter for Pittsburgh come week one, which is pretty crazy, obviously, if that ends up being true. But we'll talk some Combine stuff on today's show there as well. Great night of college basketball tonight. Not as great as last night, but a top 25 matchup, top 15 matchup between UConn and St. John's in the Big East. UConn about a 5-6 point favorite there as they take on Rick Pitino. Speaking of Pitino, Xavier in action tonight, and there was a report yesterday that we did not talk about on the show, but I think it was Jeff Goodman came out and said, yeah, there's a real world where Richard Pitino, leaves Xavier after this year to go be the head coach at Providence. Xavier plays Providence tonight, and right before we came on the show here today, right before we came live, about 10 minutes ago from now, Pitino put out a tweet basically saying fired up for tonight, looking forward to staying with Xavier for the next several years. So, pretty much puts an end to those rumors right here, right now, really less than 24 hours after they were brought up. So if you're a Xavier fan, fingers crossed that Richard Pitino sticks around. I think this program could have a lot of success with them at the helm, but need to pick up a win tonight against Providence. We will see if they are able to do that. As always, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Closing in on 22,000 subscribers. Like the stream, find the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and tell your friends about what we're doing here at the show, what we're doing here at Chatterbox Sports. Obviously, we're live right now, and we appreciate everybody tapping in on YouTube, but the majority, I would say, of our audience comes via podcast there as well, and make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star review. That goes for Chatterbox Reds as well as Chatterbox Bengals. I know the fellas are planning some videos for Chatterbox Bengals and podcasts, so be on the lookout for that. But lots of exciting stuff going here at Chatterbox. Let's actually start with the Cincinnati Reds. Don't have too many thoughts, but we'll kind of just recap what transpired in the game yesterday. Reds, by the way, pick up their first win. Knock off Kansas City 5-4, 1-2 now in the spring. I understand it's exhibition, doesn't really mean anything. You could lose every game and then go on a crazy run to start the regular season once we get to the end of March. But I do think a couple of things that have transpired over the first 3 games, and certainly that transpired in the 9th inning of the game yesterday, are pretty telling and should excite a lot of people that are fans, of course, of the Cincinnati Reds. They're back in action today, by the way. Chicago White Sox, 3:05 first pitch, first Dolo day of spring. But Andrew Abbott got the ball yesterday. Wasn't super clean, gave up a couple of runs, gave up a home run, went 2 innings. Don't really have any significant takeaways there. Abbott's going to be fine. There's a lot of people that, for whatever reason, like disrespecting Andrew Abbott, and I'm pretty excited for him to get the ball once the real games come and he can continue to silence all the doubters. Williamson Wentz, kind of similar. Right, not super clean, gave up a couple of runs as well. He went 2 innings, and then a bunch of guys that most of us that, aren't super geared in, maybe I've never heard of. Sam Maul also got an inning in the game last night. Reds showed a little power in the game. Eugenio Suarez hits his first bomb of the spring. Him and Ellie actually went back-to-back, right? Now we know with Ellie, he was facing and dealing with that quad injury throughout the whole second half, basically, of the year. Last year, lost all that power. It was well documented. We're like, man, what in the world's going on with Ellie? Now he's back. Now he's healthy. He's put on some muscle, as we've talked about on the show in the past. And I think he's a guy that you need to be a complete player, obviously. He's got to get on base. He's got to draw some walks. He's got to steal more bases than he did last year. He's got to play better defense. But he's also got to put the ball over the fence a little bit. And I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that he can do that come the regular season. Reds put together some runs, able to get back into the game late, and that's kind of my biggest takeaway, because it's spring, it's exhibition, but that doesn't mean that your heart rate doesn't increase a little bit there in the 9th inning when you're down a run, trying to mount a comeback, trying to tie the game, trying to take a lead, and that's what we saw from this collection of Cincinnati Reds at the end of the game yesterday, and pretty unbelievable that it was Edwin Arroyo. He comes through with a big-time hit there to ultimately tie the game for the Cincinnati Reds, and he's solid. Had a really nice, solid start to the spring, I should say, and a lot of reason to be optimistic with him. Just the clips I see of him, how he plays out in the field, lets you know why the Reds aren't just going to, move off him and try to bring a guy in as far as the trade goes. Now, obviously, there's only 9 spots out on the field, or 8, obviously, if you don't count the pitcher, and you do the numbers game. It's like, well, McLean's here, Stewart's here. Are we ever going to have a spot for him? I would like to see Edwin Arroyo with the big league club at some point, just to see what he's capable of, because the hype has been really high. The expectation level has been high. Obviously, missed a whole season not too long ago with a serious injury, but really impressed with what I've seen from him the beginning of the spring. He comes up with a clutch hit, ties the game. South Stewart also got things going as a pinch hitter off the bench, right? Talked about this a lot on the show. That is just one of the hardest things to do in baseball, in my opinion, is if you're a guy that doesn't get the start and you're sitting there on the bench and you're cold and then you're asked to come into the ball game in the biggest moment of the game, the end of the game, where you need to do something, you need to get on base, you need to drive in a run and produce for your team. And Sal was able to do it. Again, not the same as, game one of a playoff series, right? But still, to come off the bench and be able to produce a hit, kind of get the inning going. Big-time stuff there from South Stewart. Michael Toglia, he ends up singling in the game-winning run. Cam Collier getting some action there for the Reds as well in spring training. So, nicely done for the Reds. You see Abbott get an opportunity to get the ball. Williamson back out there. Were either of those guys perfect? No. First start of the spring. It's totally fine, right? You get a lot of bullpen work in. You get some clutch hits in the ninth inning, and you get a couple of bombs for two guys that need to hit a lot of bombs this year in Eugenio Suarez and, of course, Elly De La Cruz, and they're back in action today. Dolo Day, always exciting, right? I mean, one thing about Nick Lodolo, you can be frustrated about his IL stints and his blister problems, right? But when he's on, he's virtually unhittable. When he's throwing that back foot slider, that is absolutely nasty. And looking forward to seeing some of the highlights from him today as he takes the ball at 3:05. Before we get into the Cincinnati Bearcats, I want to start here, before we get into the Cincinnati Bengals, I want to start with the Cincinnati Bearcats. They lost last night, 80-68 on the road in Lubbock, Texas against Texas Tech. Texas Tech was a team that before JT Toppin got hurt had all types of life when it came to hoisting the trophy at the end of the day. I don't think that's me being hyperbolic. I think that was a real situation with a healthy team that they could make a run, get into the Final Four, and maybe even win the whole dang thing. He goes down. This was game 2 without him. They've had success without him. Now they haven't played top-of-the-line competition. Kansas State, who just fired their coach, and, of course, UC there as well. But there was really only one recipe for Texas Tech to win this game, and really for them to win it handedly, too, as they cover the number. They win the game by 12 points. They needed to spread the floor. They needed to offensive rebound, and they needed to make shots. That's exactly what they did. We came into the show yesterday, and it's like, just don't let Christian Anderson kill you, right? If he doesn't kill you, make some of the other guys hurt you a little bit, you have a good chance to at least keep this thing close late. Well, Anderson killed you. He had 31 points, was facilitating the rock a little bit there as well, shooting from the outside, and he was virtually unstoppable. And we pick on UC all the time, and rightfully so, but UC is one of the best defensive teams in the country, and they were trying some different stuff on him as well. They were putting 2 on the ball from time to time there as well. Wasn't working. He just continued to spray. He continued to hurt this team, and they score 80 points in the game. A couple of the other sharpshooters there as well for Texas Tech had a good night shooting the basketball. And if you're UC, you have to be frustrated about your struggles rebounding, right? So many second chance opportunities for Texas Tech in this game, and the reason why it is so frustrating, because it's not like they have a big-time presence down low. Very similar in a lot of ways, in my opinion, to the Xavier game, the crosstown shootout several months ago, right? Where it's like, you have the bigger team. Use that advantage. Rebound the basketball better than the opposition. Throw it into the low post. Get some easy opportunities at the rim. UC did not do enough of that in the game. They did not rebound well enough. Too many second-chance opportunities for Texas Tech. That ultimately was the difference in the basketball game for the Red Raiders. As I mentioned at the top of the show, fun start to the beginning of the game, right? Seemingly picked up right where you left off against Kansas. Baba Miller was playing well. Mustafa Cham was playing well. They're making everything they looked at. And you're like, oh, my goodness, they're going to put together another run, pick up another huge game, and we're really going to be talking about the Cincinnati Bearcats being on the bubble. But it was those second-chance opportunities. Texas Tech, the second part of the first half, went on a run, and ultimately they never looked back. UC also had to shoot the ball a little bit better. I thought Cham was really good in the game. I thought clearly he was UC's best player. Could have seen some more from a rebounding perspective with him. I think, again, it's kind of the most frustrating part. It's like, Mustafa, you're the biggest guy out on the floor, all right? Use your body, use your size, and go get us some boards. And he did that from time to time. I just don't think he did it at a high enough clip for the Cincinnati Bearcats. But they had to shoot the ball better. I thought Day-Day had lots of opportunities. I thought they did a nice job giving him some open looks, right? Usually that's been a gripe that I've had against West, right, where they're running their half-court offense, and it's like you're just standing there staring at each other, not doing anything. West is yelling stuff, and he doesn't even know what he's saying. It's like there's just no plan out there offensively. I thought that looked like they had a plan, right? They were drawing up some nice stuff. They were getting some open looks, via different ball screens or different actions in order to get Day Thomas in a position where he had the basketball on the perimeter. It was a good shot. He was open, and he just wasn't able to hit it at a high enough rate. I think it was like 4 of 12 between him and JC from behind the arc, which, yeah, it's not putrid, right? It's not 9% like we were talking about yesterday with Baba Miller, but not good enough, especially if Texas Tech's filling it up and you got Christian Anderson dropping 30-plus points in the ball game there as well. So UC needed to shoot it a little bit better. They had to be better on the boards. Ultimately, they were not able to do it, and it cost them the game at Texas Tech. Now, Wes, after the game, he was trying to, put on his optimistic hat and say, you know what, in this league, it's tough. When you go into a stretch like they just did on the road, you just want to split, right? You just want to go 1-1 against a Kansas and Texas Tech, and then you kind of say, you know what, felt like kind of a win for us. We'll go back home. We'll protect home floor. Well, that's all great if you don't lose to Eastern Michigan, right? The team that's bottom 3 in the MAC that Miami just beat by double digits last night, right? It's all great if you take care of a Xavier team who clearly you have more talent than, right? It's great if you can at least compete in a game against Georgia or hang on against a Clemson, right? Or beat a West Virginia when you had multiple opportunities to do it at both their place and your place. When you lose all those games, it forces you to be relatively perfect down the stretch. UC obviously wasn't able to do it last night, and it's going to come back to bite them. Is there a world where they could still sneak into this thing? Maybe, but you're looking at running the table and then going on a pretty substantial run, I think, in the Big 12 tournament in order for that to happen, which, by the way, you got BYU on your schedule. They got, a consensus top 2 pick and AJ Debanza. But they just lost to UCF, right? So I think that BYU team came into the year with Bob Wright III and Debanza and Saunders as well. Obviously a really good player. I think the expectation level for them was pretty high. They're not a bad team. I think they're still dangerous in the tournament, but I don't think they're as good as many people thought going into the year as far as just the record, the wins and losses, and the domination or lack thereof throughout the course of their schedule to this point. And, even if you beat them, you need to beat them, but is that win as good as maybe you thought a couple of weeks ago? Probably not. So UC is going to have some opportunities down the stretch here in these next 3 games. Probably be favored in a couple of them, I would imagine, there as well. Got to take care of home floor, got to run the table the rest of the way, and then you got to win a couple of games in the Big 12 tournament, I think, in my eyes, in order to have a chance. So, again, we thought this roster was a little bit more complete. I think a lot of us were excited about the roster that was constructed going into the year by Wes Miller, and they've struggled with stuff, right? Jalen Hayes, obviously, Sean Abayev getting injured, right? Kirk Kriisa has not been 100% when he's been out there. It hasn't looked like what we thought it would look like for Kirk Kriisa. But at the end of the day, they are really reliant on Baba Miller playing really well in order for them to win. And he was fine. I don't want to say he was bad, but he scored all of his points for the most part early in the first half. And then the final, the second half and several minutes there in the first half, he really wasn't a factor offensively. And they just don't have enough horsepower, especially when they're not shooting well from the outside. Day and JC not making enough shots. Play on the road against a team that, like I said, with Toppin, was a national title contending team. They're still hungry. They're not just going to wave the white flag without their best player. Christian Anderson has a lot of potential. He's shown a lot of poise this year. I think he's probably the most improved player in the country from last year to this year. Been blown away by how good he is. You knew the talent was there, but now you're really starting to see him fill up the stat sheet. And, he has a great game. They shoot it well from the outside. They get second chance opportunities on the offensive glass. Not enough for UC to contend with, and they lose the game last night. Important stretch for them over these next few games. They just want to, hang on to some hope that they could still be alive in this thing. And Wes, very clearly, is coaching for his job, right? That was a storyline that we talked about yesterday. They go in here and they beat Texas Tech. All of a sudden, if you're Wes Miller, I don't want to say you're comfortable, but I think you're looking in the mirror going, oh, there's a real world where I'm back next year, right? You lose last night. Probably are going to drop one of these few games down the stretch, and you think the writing is on the wall still for Wes Miller. But give him credit for fighting till the end, showing some life here at the end of the season when everybody, including me, including everybody at this company, had written them off. They deserve some credit for it, but a golden opportunity with Tobin being out, having, a size advantage down low, and not able to capitalize. Great first 10 minutes of the game, but not a complete enough performance to claim victory last night in Lubbock, Texas. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the Cincinnati Bengals. Zach Taylor, Duke Tobin, they spoke at the podium. I think there's several noteworthy takeaways from both guys. We'll spend more time talking about Duke. We're going to start here with Zach. It's different this go around with Duke Tobin because usually it's like, oh my goodness, Duke Tobin speaking, drop everything you're doing and listen. Well, we got him for over an hour at the end of the year, right? He got basically all he wanted to off his chest. And this session that he had at the Combine was much shorter than the one last year. I think it was only about 13 minutes. And then Zach and Duke always do this every year where they kind of have like a scrum just for Cincinnati media folks off to the side, and they answer some more questions and give, I guess, less political, more detailed answers than, what they give nationally at the NFL Combine. But let's start with Zach. A couple of things here. We joke, and we were doing it with Reed, too, when we were still doing Off the Bench, which, by the way, people were asking. At some point, that will be back. I don't know exactly when it will be. Reed's doing well. Baby's doing well. Wife's doing well. But we're at a point right now where we're just kind of rolling with my show. But we'll see a lot of Reed Mouse coming up, certainly, there as well. But we joke about the cohesion and the collaboration, right? Those are kind of two buzzwords that Duke and Zach love saying, which if I was in that spot, that's what I'd be saying too, but as fans we can sit here and make fun of him a little bit because clearly hasn't resulted in playoff appearances and certainly not playoff wins over the course of the past few years either. But Zach's point was, we're much further along kind of in the process this year. And, people don't love to hear that, but it's true, right? I mean, last year they're hiring a whole new defensive staff. They're trying to get their players acclimated. I'm sure Zach's trying to figure out, okay, what does Al exactly want to do on defense? How are we going to go about installing this? How are we going to go about communicating it with our players? Well, it's a little bit different because now this is year 2 of that system on defense, right? You have a lot of young guys who, like it or not, they got better as the year went on. It was painful, and it took a heck of a lot longer than we wanted to, but there was improvement. So they came out at the end of the year and they're like, we're not going to press the panic button. We think we're heading in the right direction. We're keeping Zach. We're keeping Duke. We're keeping Al Golden and the whole staff, and we're going to just run this thing back. So I agree with Zach that you better be further along now than you were last year. But again, is that going to equate to wins on the football field? That's all, obviously, we care about. James Casey elevated to run game coordinator. We haven't talked about this yet on the show. Look, I think as fans, we evaluate the head coach, and I think you can evaluate the play caller as well, and you evaluate the GM. As far as assistant coaches go, we don't really have a clue, right? Wide receivers coach for the Bengals, it's like, he's really good, right? But he also has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So, a lot of people probably would be really good with those guys there as well. But James Casey's done a really nice job with the tight ends, and he gets a promotion, run game coordinator. And, Zach has spoken glowingly about him. I know he has a very close relationship with Zach Taylor. He's done great work with the tight ends. And it's not like he's got Jamar and T in his room, right? It's, lower drafted guys, some more free agents. There's been a lot of overhaul in that room, guys coming in for a year, guys leaving, the Hayden Hursts of the world, the CJ Uzamas of the world there as well. And James Casey's always really done a nice job. And Zach has talked about how he's not one of those guys where it's like, I got to get my thoughts out every 20 minutes here in this meeting, as I'm sure a lot of assistant coaches are as they try to prove themselves. James is more of a guy that he sits back, and then he wants to make sure that when he speaks, everyone kind of stops what they're doing and says, he's speaking. This has got to be important, right? And he gets elevated to run game coordinator. I thought the Bengals did some nice stuff in the run game as the year went on, and I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about them being able to continue that, right? With Samaje still under contract, Chase Brown, lots of dialogue around him and his future, but he's under contract for this year. And I think it's fair to say he's a top 10 running back in the league, right? Is he your power guy like Derrick Henry, or you're just all-out speedster like Jahmyr Gibbs? He's fast as heck, Chase Brown, but, he doesn't get as much hype as some of those other guys. And obviously he plays on an offense with a lot of elite players there as well, which certainly help him. But excited for James Casey to get the opportunity to be a run game coordinator. The way I evaluate these assistants is like, offensively, you're all great. You're all doing a great job. Keep it up. Defensively, you all got a lot of work to do. That's kind of my takeaway. I think most fans feel the same way there as well. lots of noteworthy stuff coming out at the NFL Combine. I don't think any, to this point, more noteworthy than this. Sean Payton is giving up play calling duties. Davis Webb is going to be the play caller for the Denver Broncos. And it just goes to show you, man, this league is a week-by-week basis, and it certainly is a year-by-year basis as well. The Denver Broncos won a ton of games this past year. I think we all were like, yeah, it would surprise us if they won the Super Bowl. Obviously, if Nix doesn't snap his ankle, they have an opportunity to do that. You know, in that weather game, did they beat New England? We don't have to dive into the weeds there. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't think so. I don't think Stidham necessarily lost them the game. He had the interception, but that weather was just a mess. The Patriots had the lead. They won the game. But Sean Payton is viewed as one of the best head coaches in the National Football League. And there's people, he's a polarizing figure. And I think a lot of people view him as kind of just not a nice guy, which I don't know him, but I get why people would say that. I think he walks around as if he's got 5 rings and he's got 1. But I've always loved Sean Payton. I think he's tremendous. Would love to talk to Sean Payton. And he's clearly one of the best head coaches in the National Football League. But the reason why he's viewed that way is because he's an offensive guru, offensive genius, great offensive play caller. And he is not going to be calling the plays for the Denver Broncos. It is going to be Davis Webb. And he had just fired his offensive coordinator, he being Sean Payton, after going to the AFC Championship game. Davis Webb was kind of a hot commodity. There were some rumors around him and some of these head coaching openings, and he's like 30 years old. He is not old at all. Played in the league as a quarterback there as well. Feels like, you know, if he has success, certainly calling the plays in Denver with Bo Nix, probably going to be a head coach next year. But it's just crazy to me because Sean Payton, that is his thing. You think of Sean Payton, you think of him calling the plays with his laminated sheet that he's got real up close to his face, and he's barking out those long play calls, right? You've seen the clips of him talking to Drew Brees in New Orleans. Like, it's just going to be weird without him calling the plays. And I think everybody that is a fan of the NFL and certainly is a fan of the Cincinnati Bengals says, if they were the number 1 seed in the playoffs, went to the AFC Championship, and this guy literally is an offensive genius, and he is giving up play calling? Well, maybe you should give up play calling as well, and Zach Taylor. And he made some comments in the national part of the session that made people think, oh, wait, he's open to giving up play calling. What he was saying is that he was open for Dan Pitcher to leave to call plays on a different team. Not saying that he wanted that to happen, but basically how it works is in the NFL, Dan Pitcher didn't need permission to interview for the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns because it's, you know, a promotion. He needs permission from the Bengals to interview for these OC jobs, even if it is quote-unquote play-calling duties. Like, in my mind, the Tampa Bay OC job would be a promotion from the Bengals OC job because in Tampa, you're actually calling the plays. In Cincinnati, it's Zach, but that's not how the league views it. They view it as kind of a lateral move, so he would need permission from the Bengals in order to do that, which the Bengals obviously granted as he interviewed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the 2nd consecutive year. But Sean Payton's doing it. Should Zach Taylor do it there as well? And then Zach Taylor said in his non-national session with the local people, he was like, yeah, that's not, you know, what I meant. I'm clearing the air here. Just meant that pitch could go somewhere else and that I'm going to be calling the plays still here in Cincinnati. And Dave Canales, by the way, in Carolina, who we all laughed that they made the playoffs, but they were a playoff team and had the Rams on the ropes. People forget about that. Had the Rams on the ropes. He's giving up play calling duties, and that's how he got that job in Carolina, because he was a play caller, an offensive guru. So I think people are going to look at this, and there's been a lot of noise about Zach giving up play calling for a long time, but now if it's like, yo, Sean Payton, and they were just a 1 seed and got to the AFC Championship game, he gave him up, and you're not going to give him up? I get that. And I was talking earlier about how Zach was joking with some of the local media members about how they could do a reality series about play calling in the offensive or in the National Football League. And he goes on to say it's a collaborative effort, right? Just because he's the one talking in Joe's ear doesn't mean that he is the technical play caller, right? He says that Dan Pitcher is a play caller. He said, to say he doesn't call plays isn't true. What is the difference? And you saying it and me saying it. We're all on the same page and the same outcome. He and I coexist really well together. So I think it gets overblown, honestly. I don't think it's a situation like Ohio State, what they did in the playoff, where they just panicked and were like, Brian, you're not doing it. Ryan, you're doing it in the biggest game of the year after having not done it for 2 years. That's not this kind of situation. I think it's definitely more of a, cohesion, right? Coexistence, as Zach said, right? I think they're all on the same page about it. I think it gets overblown a little bit, but that's definitely going to be a conversation topic for a lot of people in this city as far as Zach giving up the play calling or not. I wouldn't expect him to do that. Let's transition here to Duke Tobin, right? A lot of diplomatic answers, a lot of political answers, but I do think we learned some things from Duke Tobin being at the podium. I wouldn't say any of it necessarily was intriguing. I think it's fair to say some of it was frustrating. I definitely know none of it was surprising. So we're going to kind of break it down here. I'm going to read off some of these quotes, so bear with me, but I do think it is important to really dive into the details here. The first question that I want to address here is a lot of us are looking at the cap, right? And we're looking at a guy like Max Crosby, and we're like, the Bengals just seem like they're one superstar away on the defensive side of the ball from really making a run at this thing, right? You consider and say, they're 6-11, they're not close. No, they are close, right? With that offense, they're always close. Clean up the defense, go make a big-time swing, whether it be trading for a superstar or signing a guy like a Jalen Phillips or a John Franklin Myers or an Odafe Owe even to some degree, right? Well, that's not going to be happening. Here's what Duke Tobin had to say as it relates to big swings. We're always looking if there's an opportunity that we feel warrants it. You have to give up things. And when you take a big swing, there's a big chance you miss. And it can stay with you for a long time and keep you in the dugouts if we're staying with baseball. We don't want to stay in the dugout. That's not a place we want to be. You don't get to take a big swing for free. Big swings take big compensation. He may as well held up a sign that said, "We're not trading for Max Crosby," which we all knew this, right? It gave us some content here at the show. It gave me, I think, like 2 or 3 segments. That was good. Appreciate the Bengals for doing that. But that ship has sailed. The Bengals aren't trading for Max Crosby. Johnny Spytek, the GM of the Raiders, actually came out and was like, we want him to be on our team. So maybe nobody is trading for Max Crosby, but they're not taking that big swing, right? They're not signing Jalen Phillips. They're not signing John Franklin Myers. They're not trading for a superstar player. That's not happening. They're going to be back to where they were in the 2021 year, right, when they went to the Super Bowl. What did they do? They attacked mid-tier free agents who, if you're a true football junkie and ball knower, you know these guys. But if you're just a Bengals fan and just watch the Cincinnati Bengals, you're probably not going to hear of a lot of them, right? And they're going to gear in on that area of free agency like they did in that 2021 cycle when they got Chidobe Awuzie, Larry Ogunjobi, Mike Hilton, and Trey Hendrickson, who, by the way, when the Bengals got him, he wasn't Trey Hendrickson, right? He was just some guy on New Orleans that, yeah, he had some upside and, yeah, he had some sacks, but he wasn't a sack king. He wasn't Mr. 17 and a half, right? So that wasn't like a crazy swing when they went and got him. They're going to attack mid-tier free agents. We've talked about a ton of these names, the Draymond Joneses of the world. Does Nakobe Dean fit that bill? Probably not. Right, a guy like maybe a Logan Hall on the interior from Tampa Bay, he could perhaps be in that area for the Cincinnati Bengals, but they're not taking a big swing, which isn't surprising. And at the same time, it is frustrating, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be bad again, right? There are good players that are going to be available that can help this team win, and if you make the right acquisitions, they can be really good pieces for you. Now, is it a little bit concerning that they just want to say, yeah, well, it worked in 21, we're going to do it again? Well, you've been trying that for several years since then, and it hasn't worked, right? But takeaway number one for me, he didn't go out there and say it, but that was his way of saying, yeah, we don't want to be in a situation where we hurt ourselves really far down the line. That frustrates me because you have Joe Burrow, right? You don't have some bum playing quarterback. Who cares about down the line? He's turning 30 in December. You got 5 years of him playing elite football. Get crazy. Go all in. Who gives a rip what happens past that point? That's where some of the frustration comes in. Don't expect Cincinnati to make a big swing. I think it was pretty obvious when he went out there and said that. Restructuring Joe Burrow. Is that something that is going to be transpiring for the Cincinnati Bengals? Here is what Duke had to say. We look at all areas to increase our competitiveness if we have to. Cap dollars have to be counted. So if we can accomplish that, what we want to accomplish without pushing things into future problems, we'll do that. If we need that, we'll consider that as well. Like I said, we're open to doing anything we need to do to improve our team where we're satisfied and going to win a championship. That's our mindset. That's the way we're going to go into the offseason. We have resources right now, but we'll see what we can get done. might as well held up a sign and said, hey, we're not restructuring Joe Burrow's contract. Again, I don't understand. Who cares about down the line? Win here, win now. Go all in trying to win. Duke Tobin says he's always been all in. That's not true. And I get there's, some things organizationally from ownership that may be getting in the way a little bit. Who knows if the scouting department size is his call or the Blackburn and the Brown family's call. I don't know. But to me, they're not just going to restructure Joe Burrow's contract for the sake of going all in. Like, oh, yeah, we can free up $20 million. Let's do it. Frustrating? Not surprising. They haven't restructured their contract of a quarterback ever, right? Now, the reason why there was, some hope and optimism that maybe they would is because they've gone off the norm for Joe Burrow in the past, right? Just as far as the contract they gave him, giving in to some of his demands with the receivers, with T, right? Remember, T. Higgins is here because of Joe Burrow. That is it, right? If it were not for Joe Burrow making those comments, I really don't think T. Higgins would still be a Cincinnati Bengal. But, again, he may as well head up a sign. The Bengals are not restructuring Joe Burrow's contract. Not surprising at all, but frustrating, right? They are looking at the cap going, well, we've got plenty of room to still make something happen, make some good things happen for us now without penalizing us down the road. The great teams don't operate like that. The teams that are trying to hoist trophies don't worry about down the road. They deal with it when it comes. Look at Philadelphia, right? How many times have they restructured? How many times have they moved money down the line or moved assets away from years to come to be better in the short term? And then the long term shows up and they go, all right, how do we pivot? How do we get back here? Right? I think A.J. Brown, they've lost some compensation, in the trades that Howie has made. I think he could get it right back with moving A.J. Brown here this offseason, which I would not be surprised. In fact, I would say there's a better chance A.J. Brown gets moved than he doesn't get moved. But Bengals seemingly are not restructuring Joe Burrow's contract. Now, those two things about the big swing and about the restructure, you can be disappointed, you can be frustrated, shouldn't be surprised at all. But this next part is where I get a little bit angry, right? I would just say disappointing is kind of the first two, but it's just not surprising. Like, it doesn't drive me crazy because I knew that was going to be the outcome for the restructure and the big swing. But this one drives me a little nuts, and this quote's a little bit longer, so bear with me here. But I think it's pretty clear that if you had to say, what is the biggest need for Cincinnati, it's the defensive line, right? After the performance of Myles Murphy, I would say that DT is more important than edge, but they're 1A and 1B. Like, they're right there, neck and neck with each other. Here's what he had to say about the defensive tackle position. And again, this makes me a little bit angry, so bear with me here. I think that it can play better. You think so? Did you look around and watch the rest of the league? Yeah, it definitely can play better. I think those guys can continue to improve. Who? I think some of them have the talent it takes to be effective players in the league. You think Chris Jenkins can be an effective player in the league? You think McKinley Jackson can be an effective player in the league? I think the unit as a whole, didn't play well as a group. Didn't play as well as it should have, as it could. You think so? Anybody think the DTs played well out there? Yeah, no kidding. Captain Obvious. But I think that's on those guys to take the teaching. We're doing things differently there. And I think that they're growing into those roles. Growing into what roles? Roles of playing bad football? I have a lot of regard for all those guys. And I think they have roles going forward for us. I think Chris Jenkins has a role with this team. I think McKinley Jackson has a role with this team. I envision roles going forward, or they still wouldn't be here. So I haven't given up on any of them. I see talent in them. I see an eagerness to be good football players. And so I think there's still two of them that are pretty young in their career. He, of course, is talking about Chris and McKinley. I think B.J. Hill really battled through significant things this year to where he couldn't practice all the time. I think he got that taken care of, and I think he might have a real bounce back when he can practice and so forth. But he was a warrior for us because he had significant things that were going on with his foot and his ankle. And, we tried to get them to Sundays, and he battled through. That's what it's all about. Those are the types of guys you need. And then Chris was coming on before he got hurt. Chris Jenkins was coming on before he got hurt. And I think Chris can kind of play all along the D-line, which is something that Al and Jerry Montgomery, offensive line coach, want these guys to have flexibility and the ability to play in multiple techniques. I think Chris has a chance to really do that. And the more McKinley gets to play, the more I see coming on. He's got to earn the right to stay out there and play. Couple of takeaways. We'll talk about the BJ aspect in a second, but like Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, I understand you took them in the second and third round, but if that is your plan at that position, you did it the past 2 years, and it did not work. You went 6-11 last year, and you had a historically, hilariously bad defense through the first half of the season. And you just are going to say, these guys will figure it out. They'll get better, right? No, you can't be that patient in the National Football League. I'm not saying cut them, but give them a significant role on this defensive line. That, to me, is absurd, right? There has to be a better plan. I get wanting to stick up for your guys, right, because you're not going to cut them and they're going into year 3 of their contract. I understand that. But to sit there and act like they're going to have a role and sit there and act like you might be fine at that position, are you kidding me? That is why your team stunk last year, because your defense was horrible, and it all starts in the trenches. Those guys were terrible. You have to add new guys to the mix, and I'm sorry that I'm sitting here banging on Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, but they've been here for 2 years now. I get they've had some injuries, but when they've been out there, it has been absolutely abysmal. And they have not made a positive name for themselves at all. I don't get it. I can appreciate, the relationship he has with those guys, and, he's not going to come out there and say what I just said, right? I get he can't do that, but he also can be like, yeah, it's not good enough. We have to understand that it's not good enough. Candidly, it's not, and we're doing everything in our power to improve the guys that we have and bring in guys that are capable of playing winning football for us at that position. That's not what he said. He basically was like, yeah, those guys are fine. They haven't been good for us yet, but they'll be good. They're coming along. Next year, just watch. They're going to be really good. Pretty frustrating. As for BJ Hill, he's not getting cut after those comments. I think that's, of all the things that Duke Tobin said throughout the press conference, that to me is like, there's your breaking news. BJ Hill's not getting cut. He's due a $2 million roster bonus like 5 years into the new league year. We were talking about cut candidates a lot, of course, over the past few weeks. I was like, I think you should cut either BJ or TJ just to get some new blood in there, new faces, new bodies. Well, they're not cutting BJ Hill after those comments. He's going to be back with Cincinnati. That doesn't tick me off. That's like, once he was off the field on third downs more and kind of settled into his role and they stopped asking him to do as much, it was fine. But I'm just looking for change. I'm looking for wholesale change. And, they gave him the contract last year. This is something Dallas does all the time. They're so scared to pivot. Like for the Cowboys, for instance, when they draft a guy, they love giving out second contracts because they want to validate that pick. They want to be like, yeah, I told you he was a great player when we drafted him, and here's the second contract. Look at Trayvon Diggs. Yeah, he had the year where he had all those interceptions, and it was cool, but he fell off a cliff, and now he's no longer on the team, right? You don't need to do that in the NFL. You have to be able to pivot. The Bengals gave B.J. Hill this 3-year deal that surprised a lot of us, surprised me, gave him a lot of money. Kind of feels like they're trying to validate that a little bit and be like, well, he came on at the end. He was battling through a lot of stuff. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Which, again, I'm not up in arms about that as much as I am with the Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson stuff. Because BJ has played good football. He's a great guy, great in the community, great leader for this defense, which is starving for leadership, is a good run stopper, doesn't offer much from an interior pass rush, but plays through the injuries, which is big. A lot of these guys don't. A lot of them do, but a lot of these guys are like, you know what, I'll sit it out. It would have been very easy for BJ to do that, especially when the season was going the way it was. He didn't. He fought through that. He deserves a lot of credit. They want BJ to come back. I'm for it, but you better figure out how to be better along the interior defensive line. But that was kind of the biggest takeaway for me throughout Duke Tobin's conversation was that, okay, yep, they're not cutting BJ Hill. He's going to be back with this team. Couple more before we move on. Dalton Risner. I think there was some pretty significant takeaways here from Dalton Risner as well. The quote is, he's a guy that we've talked to. We'll see if we can get something done. He's got a decision to make. We've got decisions to make, and he's a guy that we like a lot. I think the reason why this is done is happening the way it is because some of Dalton Risner's comments at the end of last year are not true, and that's okay. So I don't fault the Bengals entirely for this, especially after kind of hearing that from Duke, hearing some stuff from Zach. I kind of, I'm like, okay, this isn't necessarily the Bengals' fault. Because Dalton Risner made it seem like, yeah, I'll sign for whatever. I want to be back here with the Cincinnati Bengals. I love it here, right? Just let's get it done now. That's not how Dalton Reiser's operating, right? Dalton Reiser, we saw that list from The Athletic, and it was like, whoa, like I forget exactly where he was as far as top free agents on the list, but he was up way higher than I think a lot of us thought, right? Dalton Reiser's trying to get some big-time money. Dalton Reiser's trying to get paid, and Dalton Reisner realized at the end of last year that, there's actually a market for my services, right? Which maybe was a bit of a surprise to him considering what his market looked like the previous year. The Bengals signed him in August, right? He was on his couch. He was, doing footwork at a park down the street in his neighborhood. Like, he was not locked into an NFL roster. And now all of a sudden he has a good year because he had, some good offensive linemen around him. And he's like, I've got an opportunity to really cash in here. So, we talk about, get it done with Reisner. I don't think it's as easy as that. Reisner is going to try to get every potential penny that he can. And then it's like, well, do you want to overpay for this guy that, is old and that you signed off the street? Maybe not, especially if somebody else is going to pay for him. So Reisner made it seem like, I want to stay here in Cincinnati. I'll take a cut to stay here in Cincinnati. He's not doing that. He wants as much money as possible. Can't fault him for that. He was on his couch in August, had a good year. This is his last opportunity to make big-time money. Think about him. A lot of these guys, it's easy when we talk about these players, like, just take a little bit less money. Well, when they're done playing, right, not everybody's Tom Brady and is going to go make $300+ million being a broadcaster. Like, they're never going to make, for the most part, they could start their own business, have great success. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. But a lot of these NFL guys that aren't superstars, it's like, well, you can't just not work throughout the rest of your life, and the job in which you have isn't going to pay you close to what you're making in the NFL. So try to get every penny that you can. And as fans, we're just like, just take less money and try to get a ring. If we were in that spot, that's not what we would be doing. So Dalton Reisner is trying to get every last penny that he can. He's trying to up that number. He's not just going to come back to Cincinnati because he wants to, right? So I think that's an approach that we all have to understand, and that was also a pretty big takeaway for me when Duke talked. It was kind of like I'm an idiot for kind of not realizing this, but yeah, Dalton Reisner made it seem like at the end of the year where he's like, just sign me. I want to be here. Like, I'll sign for whatever. No, that's not what he's doing, and he's got a decision to make. Bengals have a decision to make there as well. Don't overpay, right? If somebody's willing to outbid you for him, you let him walk and then you figure it out. I think it would be easy to bring him back because then that position is in a fine spot. But, you don't necessarily have the luxury of doing that. If he has a good year and he was on a one-year deal, there's going to be a market for him. And we'll see if somebody outbids him. But I don't fault the Bengals necessarily for that. He's your guard. Value it. Bengals love just not valuing guard at all, and that has cost them. Value the position, but don't overpay for a guy that's that age. Don't do it. Last thing. One thing, again, I talked about when we first started the segment. Duke, very diplomatic, very political. Same with Zach. They always are. That's, part of the gig when you get in. Like, you just don't want to be a guy that's on ESPN saying something crazy, right, with all the attention to you. Bengals, credit to him. They've done a nice job of flying under the radar here. He refuses to say anything about a tag and trade for Trey Hendrickson. So I really got no clue. Now, remember the first 2 points that we made. They're not going to take a big swing, and they're probably not going to restructure Joe Burrow. I'm not going to go out here and say they're definitely not going to tag and trade Trey Hendrickson. They're running out of time here. It's February 25th. It's, a week-ish in order to make this decision. The breaking news could hit at any point if they decide to do it. But he was very... he basically is like, it's a complicated process, but he understands the benefits to it. And if you ask me to bet on it right now, I'd say they wouldn't do it. But I think there's a higher likelihood they do it than they restructure Joe Burrow or they take a big swing in free agency or via trade, right? I think they understand the value of getting something back. I think they understand the value of Trey Hendrickson. I think they understand the probability that he's not going to be playing football for the Cincinnati Bengals. Will that happen? I don't know, but he was very tight-lipped on that, did not go into any details on that at all, which I don't blame him. That's, he's talking behind closed doors to hopefully a lot of teams in the National Football League about it. And again, is it going to happen? Probably not. But my takeaway when, he was asked about that, and that was Jay Morrison's first question. By the way, great to have, Jay back covering the team. Duke, shouted him out there, he asked the first question. They had a nice little exchange there, but that was Jay's question, and he was like, yeah, he didn't really have anything for him at this point, and he was very, very tight-lipped about that, which is expected, but it also showed me that there is a chance that they do this. Is it a good chance? No. Is it a 50% chance? No. Much less than that. But there is still a chance that they ultimately would make that decision to tag and trade Trey Hendrickson. Okay, Miami Redhawks. Got about 10 minutes left here on the show. We'll talk about some other combine thoughts really quickly. We'll stash some of it for later in the week there as well. I do have a guest on tomorrow's show, so looking forward to that. Stay tuned for that as well. With the Miami Redhawks, they win. They go on the road. They beat Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan's terrible. All right, as the year has gone on, it is just bizarre that they beat UC in Clifton. Right, that's just embarrassing for UC. And, when you look back at this season, if Wes is no longer the head coach of Cincinnati, you go, you just can't lose that game. Right? I get it's early. I get it's feeling out process. You can't lose that game as a Big 12 team that is a proud basketball program that obviously hasn't made the tournament since Mick Cronin left. But you can't lose that game. Miami handles business, and the most impressive part about Miami is they have so many different ways that they can win, and they are so efficient, right? Skowjak didn't pop off again. Pete Suter didn't pop off again. Elmer didn't pop off again. They got action from all their guys. Like, you look at the score, it's like 12 points here, 12 points here, 10 points, 14 points. They all can hurt you, right? Wolfolk had a nice game down low. I think that's your biggest question with Miami is if you match him against like a 7-footer, are you in a dire situation there if you're the Miami Redhawks? But the efficiency, did they play their best? No. Good enough to go on the road and win. People showed out for that game way more than they've showed out for any other game for Eastern Michigan, which isn't saying probably a lot, but there were some people there. It was an environment that they had to go into, and they didn't play their best, but they all were just efficient enough to go there and get it done. Unbelievable stuff from the Miami Redhawks. They've got a couple more tests. They got a Western Michigan game. Of course, an OU game there as well, and then it'll be on to Cleveland for the MAC tournament. But that, to me, is why they're so dangerous, because it's not like, they got to shoot 50% from three to win, or, they got to feed the low post, or, they got to shoot a bunch of free throws. They can win different ways. You need to score a ton of points, great. You need Skowjak to pop off, great. Suter to pop off, great. You need him to be efficient and everybody score, great. You need to defend. Probably a weakness for them, but they've had games where they don't score a ton of points and they still win. More times than not, they're filling it up and scoring a ton of points, but they just have so many different ways that they can hurt you. And obviously, I went to Miami. I'm a Miami guy. I'm so caught up in the hype here, but I also can watch them and take the biased lenses off and just evaluate them as a team and say they're really, really good, right? Are they going to beat Duke? No, but beat some teams in the Big 12 and the Big 10, right? Get in some close games in the tournament. They've been in close games all year, right? If you're 2 minutes to go, tie game, sign me up, right? Let's go. Because they've been in that spot numerous times this year, and they continue to succeed. So what a story. Unbelievable. Travis Steele, there's the contract talk with him. I really don't have a feel for it at all because these coaches, they break your heart. That's what they do. These college coaches, they're going to sit there and be like, I love it here. It's great. It's unbelievable. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And then, boom, they leave. And you're like, what in the world happened? Right? So he would be an idiot to come out and be like, I'll feel things out in the offseason. Like, he would be an idiot not to be all in 100% love and honor, go Redhawks right now. And that's obviously what he's doing. How much can David Saylor fork up to pay him? We were talking about this, actually earlier this morning with Reed Mouse. It's like you look at Miami and you look at the conference that they're in. They have an opportunity to really start to dominate athletics, right? Especially with some of the donors that they have, right? You look at some of these other schools, and everybody's got some donors, right? UMass, I'm sure, has a lot of money. But they've got some guys that will, guys and gals that will donate to the programs, facilitate the basketball team, the football team. Now you you see that it's possible, right? That's kind of what I've been getting at with Xavier. It's like you just see the potential there with Patino. Then you're going to get some, an influx and people donating some money. Now, if you're Miami, you've had all these, rich alumni that are sitting there just, wanting the schools to be competitive in sports or the sports teams to be competitive. And now they have reason to do it because it's possible, right? And you go to Oxford and you look at the facilities that they have. Are you in Columbus at Ohio State? No, but top-notch facilities in the conference of the MAC. They should be good at football, right? Not going to the college football playoff, but winning the MAC, and Chuck Martin takes them to the MAC championship game all the time. They should be really good at basketball. They should be really good at baseball, which, we'll be doing a lot of games there at Chatterbox. Looking forward to that, right? They should be good at soccer. They should be good at everything. And it'll just be fascinating to see how much money they can get Travis Steele and if somebody will poach him. Because there are some of these other schools, these bigger schools that have a lot of money that might not have a good program at all, but have, the ability to sit here and say, oh, here's $2 million, right? I mean, is he even going to get to the $1 million mark in Oxford next year? I have no idea. But that'll be fascinating to see what that looks like and just what the carousel of coaches looks like. I mean, look at Sean Miller. He was all Xavier, and then we'll play Texas in the play-in game, and then we'll go to Texas right after that. And it's like, okay, right. And this is the second time that guy did that. It'll be fascinating because Steele's saying all this stuff about how he wants to stay here, but if he loses one game here and there's a chance that they still don't get in the tournament, is that something that he's going to want to have to deal with long term? I'm not sure, but enjoy it while you can. Enjoy the ride, and hopefully it results in a March appearance. And, if it does, they got a chance. In that first game, they absolutely have a good chance to get it done. Good NBA tonight on ESPN. Thunder Pistons. No SGA, though. No Jalen Williams. The 2-1 seeds right now, I think fair to say, probably the two best teams in the league. Maybe you think San Antonio is better than Detroit. I picked San Antonio to win the finals before the year. We'll see. But Detroit kind of a 7.5-point favorite because of the no SGA. It's just an abdomen injury. I think he'll be back within like a week or so nothing too serious there. But OKC shorthanded in the game. In the game after that, Celtics-Nuggets, incredible game. Nuggets very much alive to win the title. What Boston has done, I've said it a million times on the show, Brad Stevens and Missoula, those guys are the real deal. And Jason Tatum back at practice. How has he really been practicing? They've been very tight-lipped about that. But I think the expectation is that number 0 in Boston is going to be playing basketball at some point. And they instantly become a title threat at that point if that's the case. So some good NBA tonight. Talking about the Lakers yesterday, and it basically came true. That's always nice. Sometimes I go on the show and I make some comments right when I compared Scotty to Tiger Woods, and then after Thursday at Riviera, he was in dead last, and I was like, oh, that didn't necessarily age well. But it's always nice when it does. I was kind of bashing Luka and the Lakers, and he had one of those games where he just wasn't efficient enough, and it cost him the game against Orlando. And pretty clearly, the Lakers, to me, not a team, unless they do some crazy stuff here going forward, that is a threat to, win the West. Don't see that happening. Competing with the Spurs and the Thunder with the team that they have, just don't see it as a possibility here at this point. One quick thought on, let's do the Steelers. Omar Khan spoke. Says that he feels as though they have an answer with the Aaron Rodgers stuff sooner rather than later. Says that he doesn't think it is going to go as long this offseason as it did last offseason. Okay. Aaron kind of does his own stuff at this point, right? He's done it for several years, right? Even when he was winning MVPs in Green Bay, where he gives it his all during the season, really does. Plays through injuries. I was really impressed by that with him this year. Has no reason to be doing that in his 40s. Playing with the broken hand and several other injuries that he was dealing with. And then, in the offseason, he's like, don't talk to me, don't contact me, I'm not doing anything football related. And then, seemingly always comes back. I feel like he's going to play, right? Which is crazy because if they hired anybody else, I would have said probably no, right? And if you would have asked me walking off the field after getting whipped by the Texans in the playoffs, I would have said probably no. But, is he going to wait all this time then just to retire? I feel like you would have that decision by now if you're Aaron Rodgers. So the Steelers are kind of in purgatory. Again, I'm an NFL fan. I don't like the Steelers, obviously, here in Cincinnati. But, an opportunity to see Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy do it in 2026. Right? I grew up watching those guys score lots of points, right? I'll see what it looks like, right? And I know that if that's the case, Pittsburgh is just going to be, further away from winning a Super Bowl than if they hit the restart button, but ownership clearly doesn't want to do that, and I think it's very much in the cards for Aaron Rodgers to come back. And, sign me up. Another year Aaron Rodgers playing football, all the sound bites and the content he provides for us, we'll do it. Why not? But then he spoke pretty glowingly of Bill Howard out of Ohio State, 6th-round pick. I thought he should have gotten drafted before that last year. I would have taken him, I don't know about the 3rd round, definitely the 4th round. goes in the 6th round, especially when you look at the quarterback class last year where it was like Cam Ward and then what? Nothing, really. And you could argue Shador, but, it was a guy that played in big games and played well in big games for Ohio State. Did he have a ton of talent around him? Yes. Does he have the best arm in the world? No. Is he really that mobile? No, but he's tough and physical and he'll put his shoulder down and get you a couple of big-time yards and big moments on 3rd and 4th down. He orchestrated the offense well enough to win a national title, which Ohio State has had a ton of talent for a really long time, and that was their only national title, obviously, besides 2014. So what could he do at the NFL level? I don't know, but I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to go with him and to see what you have in him. They really liked him when they took him, but, 6th-round pick, we'll see. But it'll be fascinating to see if Aaron Rodgers ultimately decides to come back or not. Omar Khan said that he expects to know sooner rather than later, and we'll see. But I think if you're the Bengals, it doesn't really matter, right? Because if he comes back, okay, they'll win 8-9 games, maybe get in the playoffs. And if he doesn't, even with a bad quarterback, like they're not going to bottom out, right? I think they'll, with Mike McCarthy and some of the veteran guys that they have on their team, it'll probably be around 8 or 9 wins. So, if you're the Bengals, you see that, you should win 11, 12, 13 games. And they really shouldn't be an issue. But always noteworthy as you take a look at the rest of the division, which, by the way, people ask Zach about that, and he's like, yeah, it's weird, right? Went against those guys for so long, and now they're all gone. And he said he'll get used to it pretty quickly, and I think he will as well. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. I see my guy Ronald in the comments section. He says, who takes Ty Simpson? I don't think you can bet on this yet. But Ty Simpson will be selected in the 1st round of the NFL draft. Take it to the bank. Ty Simpson's getting picked in the 1st round. Somebody's picking him. Keep an eye on the Rams, right? They've got 2 first-round picks. Keep an eye on them. I think he's going to wow some people at the Combine. He is going to throw, I think, is what I've heard. And I'm not going to say he's going to be a star starter in the NFL, but he is a legit NFL prospect. He's going to go in the 1st round. Take it to the bank. All right. Appreciate everyone, as always, for tapping in to today's show. If you missed it, totally fine. It'll be out in podcast form. Our Bengals segment also will go out on YouTube. And we've got you covered the rest of the week. I got a guest on tomorrow. Looking forward to that. More Bengals conversation, more Combine talk, and potentially a guest Friday there as well. So be on the lookout for that. But appreciate everyone, as always. Till tomorrow, take care, everybody.